So this video is going to cover different types of yields as well as different types of percent calculations. So there's 4 terms that we're going to cover in this video. The first term is theoretical yield. The second term is experimental yield. And then we've got 2 errors that we'll talk about as well. So theoretical yield, if you think about it in theory, it's what you should get. So sometimes the theoretical yield will be called the accepted value. So theoretical yield, theoretical value, accepted value, all of those mean the same thing. It's what you should get. So for example, we've been doing some activities with density. So the accepted value, the theoretical value, is the published density that you are going to look up online, that you find online for the density of, say, nickel. The experimental yield is the value that you actually got when you did the lab. So it's the value you actually calculated, or the value you actually measured. So during the experiment, what value did you get? So the only way to get this is through data collection and so on and so forth. So the value that you got, again, that is based upon your data. So these 2 values are what we're going to use to calculate our other percents. But let's just one more moment to talk about these. Theoretical yield, or theoretical value, accepted value, oftentimes you can find online. But there are also going to be times when you actually can calculate the theoretical yield. That's not going to start happening until 2nd semester. What you should get. Sorry about that. So your theoretical yield is sometimes you can look that up in a table. Other times it's actually what you calculate. So experimental yield is what you measure, but theoretical yield is sometimes going to be your calculated value. And at this point, you probably don't really understand what I mean by that, but that's okay. We'll get to that eventually. Nevertheless, this is what you're supposed to get versus this is what you actually got. So then there's 2 ways that we can compare these 2 values, and that is through percent yield and percent error. Percent yield is going to show you how good you did. So it's like what you do to calculate your grade. How good did you do, or how close did you get? Okay, so you're going to take the experimental value, what you got, divided by the theoretical value, what you're supposed to get, and multiply it by 100 in order to turn it into a percent. Again, it's like figuring out your grade. The quiz is worth 20 points. You got 18. 18 out of 20 times 100 is 90%. So that tells you what your percent yield was. Your percent error is really telling how far off you were. So to do percent error, you're going to do experimental minus theoretical divided by theoretical times 100. So how far off from the accepted value were you? What percentage off then, divided by the whole thing? So now, when you do this math, sometimes you'll get a plus value, and sometimes you'll get a negative value. For this class, keeping that value there, keeping that sign there, it tells you something. If you have a positive percent error, that means that your experimental value is higher than it should be. If you have a negative percent value, that means your percent error is lower, or your measured value, your accepted experimental value is lower than what it should be. So keeping this as a positive or negative rather than making it an absolute gives you a little bit of help in talking about potential errors within the reaction, within the experiment, that contribute to your percentage. So when you do percent error, I'm going to ask that you actually do write it as a positive or a negative, because a positive error is going to be responsible, or certain errors are going to be responsible for a positive, and then certain errors, different kinds of errors, are going to be responsible for a negative percent error. So keep that plus or minus value there, because it gives you, again, more information. I'm not going to go through example numbers because I think this is straightforward enough. But this information we're going to use throughout the year, so make sure you jot down some notes on that if you have not already. And you'll have some problem sets to do that will relate to these things. Okay? All right, that's it.